I'm here today to talk about urban farming, and more in the context of your suburban sort of sites. So rather than thinking urban sites of larger scales that might be beside railways and in community garden sized plots, we're talking about your homes. Yeah. By definition, farming is just really raising crops and caring for livestock. Yeah. So you can do that on an urban scale, even on the smaller sites. Think about, I can't have chickens, I live in a balcony. Well, you can have worms. They're still essentially livestock. So you can do it all on any scale, and we'll go into that a bit more. But it's a huge topic, and I've only got 45 minutes or so. Rather than do the traditional, I'll just blab for 40 minutes and you ask questions, it just puts me at ease, and I think it's a little bit warmer. At any stage, just ask me a question, because I'll go on and on and on and on, and then Kirsty will stop me at some point. So if something sticks in your brain, think, I'm not quite sure what that is, just ask the question straight away, rather than being really formal. So, at the start, why? Why urban farm? I have my own reasons, and everyone else has their reasons why they want to do it. What might be some of your reasons? I'll put it straight out to you guys. Why would you want to start growing your own food or livestock at home? So I missed that. Yeah. Fantastic. Education is a huge one. It's where horticulture really needs to go in the next 50 years or so, educating people. Any other reasons? Yeah. So the quality of your produce, absolutely. We have memories. Most people have memories of in their childhood of having a particular, maybe a tomato or an apple or something. It's like I just want to have that again. So there is a lot of nostalgia that comes with it too. That's also good. I used to garden with my grandparents or my parents, and they were always fond memories. Any other reason?
Why not?
Yeah, why not? Just why not? Yeah, perfect. Great one. We all hear the stories that some of the stuff that we get from the supermarkets may be 12 months old and come from the other side of the planet. Yeah, so to be able to walk outside and get a harvest, you know exactly where it's come from and what's gone into it, more importantly. Yeah, any other reason? Sorry? Enjoyment. I'm glad I was hanging on that was going to come, that was going to be my line. But thank you. Exactly. I do a lot of teaching of this sort of stuff, and the amount of people that have never really delved into it before and maybe get into there for within probably a month or two, I was like, how did I not know about this? Why didn't anyone tell me how enjoyable this is? It's, anyone that's kind of just got into gardening or been gardening for a long time has had one of those days where you said, I'll just pop out and do a little bit of weeding, and all of a sudden it's dinner time. It's like, how has this day gone? What a wonderful way to spend your day. A lot worse addictions, that's for sure. Yeah. Anything else? Exercise, fantastic, really good for your body, just slow, easy movements, moving all of your muscles, fresh air, vitamin D from the sun, really, really good for you. Yeah. Any other ones? Fantastic, that was going to be my last one. Economics. Yeah. Just imagine if you didn't buy any of your leafy vegetables for 12 months, if only that produce, leafy greens, what that would cost and what it would save you. The convenience, fantastic. Again, you're not likely to get home from work and go, I forgot to get some lettuces, and have to get back into the car and go and fight the queues at the supermarket at 6 o'clock in the night. So the follow-on from that is, sustainability as well. Getting back to that point about the lettuces, if everyone here stopped buying lettuces today and grew their own lettuces, how many trucks per year would not be on the road? And all the follow-ons from that, the maintenance of the trucks, the oils, the pollutants that go into there, huge volumes, the tyres, the trucks, we know how long tyres hang around for. So there's so many reasons why it would be great if everyone started to do some little fraction of urban farming. Yeah. So there's the whys. So now the wheres. Where to farm. Everyone lives in different places. Some people just have little balconies, some people have courtyards, some people have large blocks. It doesn't really matter. The size doesn't matter. Yeah? You can do it on any scale. I once had a a house in Brunswick. It was just concrete. So it was a small backyard, 50 square metres, completely concrete. So I went into using pots. We've got some fantastic examples of polystyrene boxes and things here. So I was able, in that 50 square metres, with polystyrene boxes and fruit trees in pots. They were all multi-grafted, so they had about 36 different varieties of fruit in pots and 72 polystyrene boxes. We were fruit and vegetable completely able to harvest all of our fruits and vegetables over a 12-month period. A household of 3 people in 50 square metres. So even the smallest of balconies, even if you produced just your leafy greens all year, that would be fantastic. Yeah. Anyone on a really small scale? Yeah. And what do you think of the challenges?
We have a very small space, so it's just kind of hard, and I'm a bit of a novice at it as well, so I'm still finding my way around it.
Yeah.
But starting off small, you know, chilies, herbs, moved up to lettuce and rocket and a few different things now.
Yeah. All these, even it's just the essentials. It's fantastic. For all those points, you save so much money and get the enjoyment of it. So, no matter what your site, you need to do, your starting point is to do what we call a site analysis. So you need to get the detail of your site, really observe it really closely. Too many people are just going out there, okay, we've got the veggie patch, it has to go out into the, right down the back of the backyard, or right on the edge of the balcony, and they're only looking at a very small portion of their site. Yeah? This is not your garden. This whole thing is your garden. If you were to just do a 360-degree turn now, you would see plants in all levels. Yeah? So it's doing a site analysis is really important. You'd be looking at the light. You'd be looking at the soils. You'd be looking at the plants that are doing well, the plants that are not doing so well. You'd be looking at the surrounding area, what we call the borrowed landscape. Because nature does not identify or acknowledge our fences or boundaries. Yeah? They're irrelevant. They're for our subconscious to think that, you know, stay away, stay away. Nature doesn't do that. Yeah? So really important to do a very detailed site analysis. Sometimes it might even be worth the money that you're going to save by growing your own produce is to get a professional to help you to do that. Because the detail can be the difference between success and failure. Yeah, too many times people are just going out buying plants and it's like, I want to have a blueberry and I want to put it here. It might not be right for that blueberry. Yeah, so you can save yourself a lot of time and money. So we do something that's called a SWOT analysis. Anyone ever heard that? That's right throughout the world. So SWOT analysis, I'll write it up. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats. So that's the analysis of absolutely everything. You have to be brutally honest. So say if you had, most people have got a lemon tree or know someone who's got a lemon tree in Melbourne. If I had 5 cents for every lemon tree question I've only said over this. They get all different sorts of issues with them. So you need to be brutally honest about this lemon tree. Is it in good enough condition? You might even come up with a system that might be on a scale of 1 to 10 or 1 to 5 of how good or bad it is. Because at some point you might need to make that brutal decision. It's like, actually I'm better off. It is so infested with gall wasp that by the time I pruned it, it would be back here anyway. Is that going to be beneficial to the rest of the site? So by doing a SWOT analysis, you make some hard calls. Better that it goes now and I can start again, or it might not be in the right spot, and that's why it's not performing well in the first place. So every individual item, right down to your decking, or your paving, or your fences, or that shed. Yeah, right at the very start, make the very hard decisions and assess whether something stays or whether it goes. By skimping at that stage, you might really alter your budget. So you could have a basic budget, get 5 years into your urban farm project, and that shed that you thought, nah, it'll be all right. It's not, and it collapses. And so that needs to come down. That can really affect how much money you've got, whether you can replace it or not, or whether that space that you could have gained 5 years ago could have become a much better element in your system that could have been giving you higher yields. So once you've done your SWOT analysis, now it's time to start preparing your brief. And I consult and design for people all the time, and so one of the first steps is when you're putting anything together, whether it be a house or a garden, is to design it, and you need a brief. And so you're effectively designer and client at the same time. So a brief is a wish list. What would you like to have in your urban farm? Yeah? And this is the part that, because it's free, the sky's the limit. Again, don't feel restricted by your wish list. You know, you might think, it's too small to have chickens. Or maybe it's not. So put it on your list. Yeah? You think, we're in Melbourne, we can't grow subtropicals. Maybe you've got a subtropical microclimate in your urban farm that you don't know yet. Put it on your list. It costs you nothing to dream big. Yeah? Really, really, really important. There are lots of people that I know that are growing bananas and avocados and sapotes and everything in the suburbs of Melbourne and growing them really well. Yeah? Next thing, which is probably that takes the most time, is the research. So from your wish list, you'll start to develop, you know, I would like to have this plant, or I would like to have chickens, or I would like to have worms, or I'd like to have bees in my system. Now there are so many, just think of plants alone, in the millions and millions of species of plants around the world. You've got to find the ones that are right for your place. So those of you who live in the northern suburbs of Melbourne, for example, the climates there and the microclimates are slightly different to Bayside, which is slightly different to Dandenong, which is slightly different to out in the west. Yeah? So doesn't mean to say that you can't have, you know, apples. There might be a specific species of apple, a variety of apple that will actually be better suited to that microclimate. So lots and lots of research. Think about chickens. They have some basic requirements, but with so many different breeds, again, some are a little bit hardier than others. Yeah, so at some point, if you know, you might think, well, I just want to have Barnevelder chickens. They might not be suited to your climate, but there would be a similar breed that would actually do quite well. So lots and lots of research. Yeah, rather than set yourself up to fail, set yourself up to succeed. And that comes down to all the research that you do. There are so many people that can help you with all those sorts of things. You know, start looking at, Fleur, for example, is going to be talking about chickens later. Maybe have a talk to her about your specific environment and how that can work for you. The plants is a big one. It's very hard for people who are especially new to garden to try and find out the ins and outs of individual species. But it's all out there. You know, talk to heritage fruit societies. Gardeners are very chatty people. Yeah, and especially when they, you know something or have a particular species of plant that does really well, they'll be all too keen to go on and on and on and tell you all the benefits of growing these things. Maybe even give you some seeds or some cuttings. From that point, again, this is where you have to get brutally honest, is start auditing the maintenance requirements of all of these individual things. In some chickens are a little bit hardier than others. Some plants are hardier than others. So if you do an audit of the requirements of weekly, monthly or yearly maintenance of a particular item, you can then start putting together, how long is it going to take me to maintain this garden? Is that suited to your lifestyle, your work life, or your how much free time you've got? And then I usually tell people, whatever you come up with, say you come up with, well, this urban farm is going to take me, you know, 1 day a week to maintain. Have you really got that? And then double it, because 1 day a week that you think is actually 2. Yeah, in reality. So we have to be honest with ourselves. So again, you're much better off, rather, even if you have a full-size suburban block, rather than using it all and not maintaining it, make it smaller. Make it something that you can contain. Again, you're better off having very small wins than oodles and oodles of losses. Yeah, set yourself up for success. And that's when it stays enjoyable, rather than failure after failure after failure. This rain's coming in. Feel free to come in, move your chairs in. Then we get to the part, we've done our research. We know what we want to have. We know how much maintenance it's going to be. We know if we want to have everything in our list, we might need to seek some help. So start talking to people. Maybe there's someone that you know that has a smaller system, a little smaller farm, but they would love to have a bigger one. Maybe you can share it. Yeah? Share the maintenance, share the space, share the yields, share the knowledge. Fantastic. All win, 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 win. Yeah? So then it comes to drawing a plan. Anyone ever done a garden design before? Yeah? It's fun. I know it sounds really daunting, and it starts really simple. So even the greatest designers, architects in the world would start their garden design. Here's my fences, there's north, there's my house, I've got a driveway. and there's a shed out here, and there's some trees. That's where you start. Can anyone do that? Yeah, it all literally starts with that. It's what we call a mud map. Yeah, so you start with what's existing today, and then you go back over your lists, over your SWOT analysis, and your brief, and start deleting what can go. And again, so you could do, put it in pencil and rub them out, and literally just keep adding things. So your chooks might go up here. I think I'd like to have chooks. And I'm going to put the chook shed over here, and I'd like to have some, tropical stuff, and they might go in there, and just keep playing around with that. You could go endless numbers, and to be honest, when I do this for clients, there might be a dozen of these that I would do before I start really putting something down. Yeah? So you can just play around with it. So it's not to scale. You don't need to have a scale rule or anything. You just need to be able to use a pen or a pencil, which is a lot of fun, because you start visualising then what it potentially could look like. So once you're happy with your mud map, then you start potentially moving into a scaled drawing. So that's where you would need to get a ruler and some serious pencils and pens and start putting it into scale. So you know which trees you've decided to get. So your dwarf trees potentially would be 2 metres tall by 2 metres wide. So you can either start drawing them in. You'd have your base plan, outside line, and all the stuff that's absolutely going to stay. So your house, I assume, will stay. Yeah. If you're on a balcony, the air conditioning unit, that's probably got to stay. Yeah. So anything that's going to be permanent gets locked in there, and you can draw that on with pen. So it's permanent. Yeah. Everything else, you can either choose to start drawing them in to scale, that is the outer perimeter, or do cutouts, which I think is a really good one. So you would have your big base plan, and so you'd have a little icon maybe of a tree, a dwarf tree that's 2 metres in diameter. And then maybe your chook house, which is 3 metres by 3 metres. So if you do them in cutouts, you can start pushing them around your master plan and just see if the numbers that you thought you could achieve actually work. So say you wanted to have 15 fruit trees down the back portion of the property. Are they going to fit? Because you're going to need paths through there. You can draw the path in to scale. Is it going to fit? Is it going to be too tight? You could even do little mock-ups when you're walking out there. You go get a couple of hardwood stakes, hammer them to the ground, and throw a bed sheet over them to give you the width and even potentially the height of a plant, even a tree. And then physically walk around and go, will I be able to maintain this one, or is that one going to poke me in the eye when I go to harvest it? Yeah? Start while you're out there on a rainy day. If you get home quick enough, you might get it today. Even start looking at how water moves around the property. What you thought was flat is never usually flat. There's always some sort of fall. And even if you really think that it is flat, just walk out your front gate and have a look at your street. Because it's on a larger scale, it will give you an idea of the topography. So again, our fences aren't there. If your street's like that, down this side, you're going to be getting all the water from all the other properties up and down the street. So detail, planning. It's really important, because it can set you up for success. Yeah. There's a little strategy in permaculture design that we call WASP. Yeah. And so when you're thinking about you're going to start implementing this design of yours, it would be implemented in water first. So WASP, W-A-S-P. So implementing how you're going to capture and then deliver water to your system, because obviously every living thing needs water. Yeah. So it might mean where your tanks are going to be positioned, get them in, and then main water lines that you might be using for irrigation systems, they go in first. And then after that, the A is for access. So how are you going to physically move around the site? Is this path going to be for wheelbarrows? Or am I ever going to need trucks to get deliveries into here? Hopefully not. Difficult in an apartment. But you need to think about that and what those surfaces might be. So it might be a little mulch path, but come winter time, when you're going to be out there and it's going to be boggy, are you going to be able to wheel your wheelbarrow through there? So maybe in the lower areas that get wetter, you might need to have a solid masonry path, like some paving down there, because we're trying to make this as easy and as enjoyable as possible. Yeah? So all this keeps coming back to this information that you gathered right at the start. Yeah? So then the S, anyone guess what the S might be? Sorry? Soil, close? Structures. So maybe that dodgy shed right at the start where you were trying to hold on to, you decided that it had to go, then it starts to get replaced. So think of usually when you're doing decent sized structures, there's going to be, you know, tradespeople or yourself and machinery and all those things to come in. You're better off getting that hard landscaping stuff done while there's no plants around. Anyone ever had tradies over? Garden beds? Don't know what it is about carpenters and plants, they just don't like it. Get out of the way. It's devastating. So you get your structures in there. Another reason for getting the structures in before any of the plants, because that can change the microclimates. Anyone aware of what a microclimate is? Yeah? Small little areas. So we're actually in the, you know, in the macroclimate of Victoria and Melbourne, but everyone's house is facing different directions. So there's going to be little pockets that have variations in weather. It might be, you feel that it's very windy on a windy day in a particular spot, or it's hotter in some spots, or more humid in other spots. So your structures really contribute to that. So best to get them in. Then you can cross-reference back to that SWOT analysis. It's like, when I had the shed, did I anticipate that it was going to be quite humid in this corner when the new shed goes up? So we're just double-checking all the time, Yeah? And then the last one, last thing to go in, the P, the plants. Absolutely last. Yeah? Whereas most people, when they're doing their gardens, head down to the nursery. You've got a bit of an idea, a bit of a rush of blood. We'll head down to the nursery and go and throw a few $100 at plants and take them over and pop them in and go, good luck. Best of luck. You did really well in South America, why wouldn't you do well in Brunswick? Yeah? So they're the very last things to go in. So you exercise restraint. Yeah? Mentioned before about soils. Yeah? So some key points to really think about when you're implementing your urban farm is soils. It's the foundation. Previous speaker was mentioning about carbon and soils and the biota that's in soils. Absolutely crucial. It's the foundation of any farm, any garden whatsoever. If you know, the soil obviously supports the plants, which support the animals. So if the soil is compromised, then everything else above it. Think of these skyscrapers. Yeah, so much time, effort, and money is put into developing sound foundations for them, because if that is skimped, then whatever comes above it is compromised, and it's only a matter of time before it will collapse. Yeah. Again, most people are like, just chuck it in, you'll be right. I know people who've spent 3 years developing their soil before they've even put a plant in the ground. Their gardens are fantastic. 3 years goes like that. I know you've got to hold yourself. It's tough. Yeah, but definitely concentrate. So that would be part of your site analysis. You'd be testing your soil. So you might be doing pH tests. You might be doing NPK, nutrient tests. And even in the urban context, we can't deny that we might need to do, obviously, heavy metal tests and toxin tests. Because you don't know who's been at your house over the last 50, 100 years and what they've been doing in that backyard. Maybe in the 20s or 30s, there was a shed there and they were doing mechanics. And just think of all the lead paints and all the toxins that could have been dumped in that soil, and you put your veggie patch straight over the top of it. So there's strategies for that. We don't necessarily let that stop you from doing it. We can do gardening in pots. We can do raised beds. We can do all different sorts of things. But it is something to be aware of. Yeah, so well worth getting soil samples taken away and tested. Or just think about, if you go vertical, if you go pots and all those sorts of things for your edible crops, and then part of your habitat gardens, and remember, we can't deny that we need to put habitat back into our gardens, that can be out in the backyard, because you're not going to be eating those things. The plants can store all that carbon and all the toxins in there, and it's not going to harm us, which is good. Yeah. So soils is absolutely crucial. The best gardeners in the world spend 90% of their time just working their soils, and if you've got healthy soils, the plants just do it themselves. Remember, the plants don't need us. Yeah? They've been only doing this. I think the first plants 3.5 billion years ago, flowering plants 2.5 billion years ago, they started developing. Yeah? How long have we been around? about that. Yeah, so they don't need us. So I'm all about in urban farming that trying to establish ecosystems that mimic natural ecosystems around the world. So you could even have an ecosystem, a South American ecosystem, and put South American plants of origin in that area of the garden, if the microclimate dictates it. Yeah, if plants are coming from the Americas, and try and emulate something from North America and grow your blueberries, strawberries, or European soils. So it all comes down to soils and microclimate. So put a lot of time and energy finding out that information. It goes a long way. It comes back to that maintenance list. The closer you can get to their natural environment, the less you actually have to interact. Because they will just go as they have for billions of years. Just imagine that. Picking blueberries, and then that's it. That'd be pretty good. Yeah. Where possible, urban farming, because we want to grow lots and lots of vegetables, but be mindful that annual vegetables take a hell of a lot of work. Yeah. So your maintenance list goes right up. If you can just do portions of them and rely on perennial plants more so, it takes a lot of maintenance out of it. Yeah. So concentrate on your soils, very, very important. Small bites, that's another one. Again, people, you do your design and think, I want it all to happen now. And it might not be possible. Budget comes into it, your time availability comes into it. So again, you're better off just taking a little bit, say I've got the design and I've done my wasp, but just little bits at a time. Very, very expensive and very time consuming. Or if you just want tats, sure, by all means, get someone else to do it. It's great, but small bites and small wins keep you motivated for that big picture right at the end. Yeah? And with most gardens, you're looking at probably 5 years at minimum for them to establish. Yeah, it's not like buying a car, you've got this instant gratification. They're living things, and it takes time to mature. My mum says I'm still not mature. Observation. You might hear all these permies using that word a lot, but it's very important. We are still learning so much about the natural world. It's still not finished either. Yeah, evolution hasn't stopped. So things are changing, and we have to change with it. So through observation, you can save yourself a lot of time and money. My mum once told us, well, our whole lives, big family, it's only a mistake if you make it twice. Yeah, the first time's a learning experience, and we do that all the time. And I've been gardening for a long time, and I still make mistakes. Kill plants. Guilty. Only because I'm trying to push the envelope. And when it does die, or it's looking really shabby, it's like, I knew that was going to happen. Why am I still doing this? So don't feel bad about it. Learn from it. Make the observations. Spend a lot of your time just sitting in the garden. We mentioned before, it's good exercise, which it is, but put lots of chairs out in the garden. And for every hour of work that you do, give yourself an hour of just sitting and watching. Be quiet and just watch who comes to visit. What was that really bad Kevin Costner movie? Baseball one. The line, if you build it, they will come. Build a dreams, that's the one. But it's true, if you build it, they will come. Yeah. So start implementing your design, and 5 years down the track, we're trying to get back to a natural ecosystem. Let the predatory insects feed on, the nasties. Call them nasties. They're all playing a role. Yeah. In permaculture, you need, in organic gardening, full stop, you actually need pests to have predators. So by making those observations, sitting and watching, okay, here's a little aphid, and then all of a sudden little wrens will come in to start feeding on them. So then where does the wren go? It goes up into that tree. Maybe they nest in that tree. Maybe I need to put a couple more of them in. Observations are crucial. Yeah, learning how the system works. We're so removed from the natural world at the moment as a species that we need to go back, take a little step back. Remember, it was this village lifestyle of everyone growing lots and lots of little things before large-scale agriculture that built our population boom. That was the model that worked. But somehow we've decided to go against it. So if we can go back to that model and all of us start doing little bits and pieces here and there, who knows what's possible for our species? We might just make it. Fingers crossed. So all those observations about building an understanding of nature. Again, the beautiful part of that is you will never know it all. And none of us ever will, which is, I kind of like that. The fact that I can do this until I fall off the twig, and it will always, you know, inspire me, yeah, and amaze me. I still remember as a very small kid, we were country kids and we weren't allowed back into the house during the day. I'm a kicked out. So come back at dinner time. So if my brother bashed me up or whatever it might be, I'd sit under a tree and just look and see little bugs or whatever it might be go past. And through the tears, now I think back, it's like I was actually quite lucky to have that exposure to nature and to still build that wonder. All these come from little seeds, tiny little seeds. Think of a eucalyptus, any of these plane trees, they come from this tiny little speck. Here we go. That still blows my brain that this comes from that. You know? Obviously there's a lot of other processes, you know, in between all that, but that's quite amazing. And so do we. Look how complex we are. We come from something even smaller than that. So the natural world is amazing. So every single day, every day is a school day, and just by being out there, and even while you're walking the streets, walking around today, looking at all the wonderful stores, what people are doing, but don't forget the plants and the animals, because they're all amazing. So the whole idea of the urban farm is that we drag all of these things. We are pulling plants and animals from all over the world, and your urban farm technically is not natural. It's made up of natural things, but it's a contrived system. Yeah? So they're not obviously indigenous to Melbourne plants and animals. We're dragging from all over. The chickens come from the jungles of Southeast Asia. Most of our fruit trees come from China or North America. Obviously our berries from Europe and North America. But doesn't mean that we can't put them into a system so that they play the same role that they did in their own. And that's the whole idea of the urban farm. Yeah, we're creating a natural system, yes, we're the little puppet masters of it all, but if we do it naturally, the whole idea is that we get to actually step back more than step in and interact. Yeah. So never forget, they don't need you, but because we're putting them into an artificial environment, we need to implement a little bit and then let them go. Does that make sense? Yeah? Am I talking too fast because no one's asking questions? Yeah? Because I'll go for hours, but Kirsty will be over soon saying, no, you've got to stop. So, following on from that point, that yes, you're making a garden, yes, you're trying to mimic nature, but as with nature, it's never finished. Yeah? So keep going, keep observing. You might have some failures, find out why, ask yourself the questions. What could it have been? Could it have been soil? Could it have been water? Was it just me being lazy? Who knows? Yeah. Climate change, too. Thanks, Kirsty. We should be there somewhere. Questions? Go for it. Fantastic. Building up organic matter in the soil. Who's got green waste bins? Yeah, they go out every fortnight or something. Yeah. There's your answer. Don't put your green waste bin out anymore. Because all those plants, all that material that you're pulling out of your garden has been drawing water and nutrients from your soil. So instead of giving it to someone else and they'll turn it into compost and sell it back to you, which is a fantastic business model. Just imagine a restaurant getting their ingredients delivered free on a weekly basis and then make food and sell it back to you. So just keep it on site. So composting it on site. So even while you're doing all this planning, drawing your designs, all that sort of stuff, not just the organic material on your site, but start inviting it in. So people coming to visit, and when it comes over, it has to be in a garbage bag full of leaves and twigs or whatever it might be, their kitchen scraps. So just keep returning that back to the soil as much as possible. It doesn't even necessarily need to be in where a garden bed is going to go, because it can be moved around, but it's just keeping that soil alive, keeping all the organisms feeding, bacteria, fungi, mini beasts, constantly. Your soil is in number one. So you can even be as lazy as I am and just do the chop and drop. So literally just chop it and leave it there, and it will be consumed. Nature produces no waste. If it's natural, it will be reabsorbed by Earth. Yeah? So how easy is that? Just chop and leave it there. you've got to get over the aesthetic that it might not look neat and tidy, but it's only a short amount of time. So in answer to your question, just start accumulating organic matter. So even if you went through your rubbish, not just your green waste bin, go through your rubbish and do an audit of what has lived once before in all of these items. Because if it's lived once before, Earth will reconsume it. That might be.
If you don't think you have to put it on your own home, and you're going to have to move every few years,
Yep.
trying to keep it sustainable, or knowing you're going to have to move every 3, 4, 5 years, is there certain things you should be not trying to plant, trying to grow, because you're probably going to have to keep moving around?
Having done it, and when I had my polystyrene box garden, so it was, remember, 72 boxes and 16 fruit trees in pots, I moved that garden 12 times. I was a renter.
You just move it.
Yeah, so I was a tradie at the time, as a landscaper, so I had a ute, so that was lucky, but everyone knows someone with a ute. I've moved 16 times myself, and I've moved other people probably 40 times when you have a ute. So potted gardens, and you can even see examples here. I still have that soil, so I treated it exactly the same. So I did no dig gardening in the polystyrene boxes, and because I was building soil, building humus, that came with me. That is biological capital, your soil. Yeah, it's a living thing. So that was 12 years ago. I still have that soil today. It's probably my most valuable possession, all the soil from those pots. So now I've moved into a house, and all those plants are slowly making their way into the ground. Even the fruit trees. So they were not even dwarf fruit trees, full-size fruit trees in pots. The big black plastic pots, 50-centimetre pots. So every couple of years I'd have to remove them and prune their roots back and prune back, essentially bonsaiing them. But they cope. Yeah. So just because you rent doesn't mean that you can't garden. Yeah. But my main thing with renters is, if you can, leave at least one plant there for the next people to come in and go, oh, that's a beautiful rosemary. Maybe I might have a go at growing some herbs. So remember, that's your little legacy to trigger something in someone else every time you leave. And that's what gardeners do, is always just leave something for someone else. Yeah. Worms into pots. Worm farming myself, so we have multiple worm farms at home for all of our kitchen scraps. I don't put our kitchen scraps into compost purely because of bringing rodents and whatever it might be. So I just give that to worms. So they're constantly laying eggs into their castings, and then by distributing the castings out into the garden or just into the tops of your pots, if the soil medium is kept moist and there is enough food for them in there, and that's the biggest thing about compost worms that differs from earthworms, is the volume of food that they need. So they eat about half their body weight every day. It's about the same as me. So you've got to be topping up organic matter for them to consume. Yeah? But with some pots, large pots, if they're in contact with the soil, you'll even get earthworms coming up to feed in them. Yeah? So just use castings, because that's where your eggs are. I think with your earthworms, they reproduce every 7 to 10 days. Not bad going. Questions?
I'm looking at establishing a veggie garden in my backyard. As we've dug into it, we've realised it's become landfill for past builders. So we've got machines and bottles and tins and everything. Rather than we're looking at doing swales and berms and doing it that way. We're better off doing raised beds now, aren't we?
Well, raised beds, or just even raised garden beds. It doesn't have to be formal, timber or whatever. Just even with no dig mounds, like you said, with berms. Yeah, so it all comes down to budget. If you can contain the soil, you're going to lose less moisture. If you can plant it up heavily, you're going to lose less moisture as well. But you've got to think about the species of plants. So if you're only 30 centimetres below the surface, anything other than your shallow rooting vegetables are going to come into contact with that. So ideally, for most of your common vegetables, you're going to need at least half a metre above that to stop their roots getting contact. And if you're going to be looking at fruit trees, then you're looking at 1 to 2 metres, depending on what they are. So in that area, maybe that's not the right area to be putting your veggie garden. By doing this sort of audit and SWOT analysis, maybe it would be better suited somewhere else. Is it a suburban block?
Frankston.
Yep. So is it backyard? Maybe front yard.
I'm doing that already.
Yeah.
I had chooks free ranging in the back and they demolished everything.
Yeah.
But this is the perfect spot with the north facing area and it's the biggest area we have.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So I think you need to come up.
Yep.
Yeah. And think vertical as well. So in permaculture we talk about zoning. Most people forget about, you know, when as soon as you walk out that back door to start getting a yield from that point. So try and keep your veggies, because they're such high maintenance, as close to your kitchen as possible. Therefore, that, you know, middle of June when you come home from work and it's pouring rain, it's freezing cold, that you're not going to run down the backyard to get some herbs and some lettuce leaves. You're just not going to do it. So if they're at the back porch, because remember, your little leafy greens don't need much sunlight. We give them way too much. So anything that you're going to harvest the leaf from, if it's in full sun all year round, it's going to struggle. Because there's nothing about that plant that says I need full sunlight. You know, if you look at making observations of plants, so they've got a big, you think of your lettuce leaves, a big broad leaf that's very thin and full of water. Everything about that plant says I come from the forest floor. I've made my leaf really bright to maximise the amount of light that I get, and I'm full of water. So I live at the forest floor where there's always lots of moisture at the forest floor. Whereas you think of a rosemary, those leaves are pinnate, really thin, so less surface area of water to evaporate in full sun, and they've got a high oil content, which has a higher boiling content in water. So they say, look, I come from an area, Mediterranean, where it's super hot. So just the physicality of every plant gives you an idea of the kind of environment that they like. So with your leafy vegetables, 2 hours of direct sunlight, ideally in the morning, first thing in the morning, that's all they need. The rest of the time in the shade. So you're not out there all summer watering, wasting water on something that just doesn't need it. Sure. Because of climate change, avocados in Melbourne are going to start doing really well. We've always struggled a little bit if they didn't have a perfect microclimate. I've got a client in Glen Iris who's got a double-storey avocado because it's in the perfect microclimate. She's got a big brick house, so it's been there for 30 years and has been fruiting for, you know, just over 20 years. Also got a client in Wallen. You know, familiar with Wallen when you go up the Hume Highway just before Kilmore. So he's got an avocado fruiting next to a dam on his 30-acre property out in the middle of a paddock. So the dam is actually creating a microclimate for it. So it's all changing. The key thing with avocados, anyone heard of A and B type avocados? So different avocados, when you're looking at your labels, they'll have either A or B, and they're really amazing things in how they flower. So the one flower, rather than some plants like your pumpkins that have male flowers and female flowers, avocados, let's say this afternoon with A types, they'll open up this afternoon being female. So the female parts of the flower are going to be receptive of pollen. Yeah, and so you'll need multiples around to try and, you know, get some mixture of pollen. And then they'll close tonight. And then tomorrow morning that same flower will open up, but it'll be functioning as male. So the male parts of the flower will be releasing pollen. So ideally you're going to have varieties that are alternating. So if all your varieties that you have are A-type, they're all going to be opening and flowering as female all at the same time.
Right.
Yeah. So look for A and B type avocado. Ideally, yeah. And there's all different sorts of dwarf avocados these days as well. You know, Wirtz, for example, is a small one. Haas is not too bad. So yeah, talk to your nursery people, look online, and try and find the right variety suited to your climate. The main thing is climate. Yeah, finding the right microclimate. That's going to be the kicker. Don't, you know, be 5-minute warning. Be cautious of, you know, how many people. There's bound to be a couple in here that have had avocados germinate in their compost from the pips. Yeah, had a few of them. Problem with that is you don't know if that pip is sterile or not. So you'll have to wait avocados somewhere between 7 to 10 years before they reach their sexual maturity. So you'll have a sizable tree in 10 years and then you'll find out whether it's sterile or fertile. Yeah, so you're better off taking cuttings.
You were talking about polystyrene boxes earlier. Aren't you concerned about the sort of chemicals in polystyrene leaching into the soil?
Yeah, I get that a lot. And there was at the start, but I was a poor horticulturalist and I got them for free. And then I had a guy that came to one of my courses was a chemist, and their lifespan is about 500 years. So So we said the volumes of leaching that would come on a yearly basis that would come out of the polystyrene box, you would be ingesting, we're ingesting more toxins right now being here than what would come out of that polystyrene box.
There's nothing you can line them with to spur that thing.
Oh, absolutely. You could line them with paper and those sorts of things, but again, there's going to be toxins that would come out of newspaper, there's going to be toxins if you lined them with plastic that would come out of that. It really comes down to you, what you feel comfortable with. Like I said, I was doing this 12, 15 years ago, still here now. Let's see what come back to me in the next 5, 10 years, check in.
Your aches and pains and ills are.
Yeah, you make the call on the materials that you're going to use. Yes, there's safer materials. Budget comes into it. So many factors come into it. I'm more of the schools like just get growing. Yeah, make a start. Your garden's never going to be finished. You graduate from polystyrene to large beds at some point.
What about using tyres then?
Exactly the same sort of thing. So tyres do leach. We know about that. Tried tyres many years ago, and I just found because of that shape of the tyre, that water sat in the bottom, so I was getting more fungal diseases than anything. As a medium, they heated up and created actually a warm soil, so good microclimate in the soil, because your plants react to soil temperature greatly. But it was just the fungal issues. So I did the classic, anyone done potatoes and tyres? Tried growing potatoes and tyres? Everyone's had a crack at that. I found that polystyrene boxes were better for potatoes. Sorry? Yeah, supermarket trolleys are a great one. They're not going to leach anything. Start getting some money back from them. But I just found with polystyrene boxes, because they're designed to stack, by putting, so you can grow shallow plants in a single stack like that. But if you cut the bottom out of another one and just leave the outer perimeter, so it keeps its integrity, and it stacks on top, you've then doubled your volume. So I've done that with all the veggies in that garden. And still to this day, I still do my potatoes in it. So plant the seed potatoes at the bottom in compost, and as they grow up, get about this high, slide the next one over the top and just gather compost around it and just leave the leaves out the top so it can still photosynthesize. And just as they move through, just keep backfilling with the compost. Thanks, Kirsty. And they just keep growing up. So I get them up to 4 polystyrene boxes high. Being so tall, that's about as far as I could reach. But I find that that's enough to get a half decent yield. So depending on varieties, in some years I've had up to 20 kilos out of a stack of 4 a yield. So you can harvest them on Christmas Eve for baby potatoes, or wait till about now, maybe over the next month or two, and get full-size potatoes. So again, the vessel is irrelevant. The plants don't know what they're in. They have requirements of soil, light, air, nutrients, all those sorts of things. So don't let that restrict you in your urban farm. Yeah, use it as empowering.
I've got really heavy clay soil, and I'm wondering whether it's worth it to try to break up the clay and get right into it, or just kind of leave it above ground in the box.
Yeah.
That lays quite a lot of land, quite a lot of clay. I really have to get
Clay is great. It's hard work, so I try not to dig in clay. Again, being in the landscape for a long time, I just didn't like digging in clay. But you can start, it doesn't mean you can't grow anything on top of it. So with no-dig principles, for example, I don't know if you're familiar with no-dig gardens, that you just start building organic matter, compost, fertiliser, mulch on top of that. And as that breaks down, all the organisms rise out from the clay and open it up, and plants' roots slowly get to impregnate into it and open it up. And so eventually, in time, you open the clay through natural processes. So rather go out there all weekend and breaking your back, digging it over, no-dig on the top of it. 6 months later, you'll get way more penetration with the no-dig on top of it than any of your clay breaker products, and organically as well. So you just bring that clay back to life. But more importantly, clay is highly rich in nutrients. Just because it's so dense, plants can't get access to it. But once it opens up, it's fantastic. It's actually a better base, in my opinion, than sand, purely for that nutrient content. Good time for one last one, anyone? Good, we're done, we're silent. I'm going to be hanging around. I'll stand over there if anyone's got any more questions. Just written a book on urban farming. So if you need to know more, again, I've got a handful of copies with me. Come and have a chat. Thanks very much for your time, and just get farming.